Hello. Hopefully you can see me. Welcome everybody to this cross-party group on cooperatives and mutuals. Please let me know in the chat if this is not working, but it seems now to be working from my side. Welcome, Croeso, to this meeting. As this is the annual general meeting of the cross-party group, I'm just going to chair the very first bit of it and then hand over to our elected chair. So Vikki Howells has been the chair of this group and is very happy to continue to be the chair of the group. Can you let me know if anyone wants to nominate anyone else, or if you are happy to second or confirm Vikki as our chair for the group? I'm not seeing any other nominations. So thank you, Vikki. Congratulations. I think you are now elected as our chair for the group, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for endorsing me for this. Enjoy being chair of this CPG. It's a great CPG, and we've got really good things to talk about in the future as well. So I'll move on now to the election of a vice chair. Our current vice chair is Luke Fletcher, and Luke has indicated that he's happy to continue in this role. So again, in the chat, please, if you could let me know if you could nominate or second Luke, or if there are any other names that anyone wishes to put in there. Right, so we've got Luke nominated and seconded, and no other names put in there. So I'm happy to confirm, Luke, that you have been re-elected to the role of vice chair for 2022 to 2023. Congratulations, Luke, and I can see he's put his thanks there into the chat as well. So now we move on to election of the secretary. So the secretariat has been provided by Compass and by Dan Roberts in particular. I know that Dan is happy to continue in the role of secretary to the CPG. So again, if we could say in the chat, please, if we're happy to have Dan as our secretary again, or if there are any other names to nominate. Okay, I can see that Dan has been nominated and seconded. Names put forward, so that's fantastic. Thank you, and thanks, Dan, for all your to date, and we look forward to working together over the coming year. If we just look at confirmation of membership of the CPG for 2022 to 23, I've got a list of names. It's myself, Luke Fletcher, Mark Isherwood, covering off the three parties there. And we've also got Hugh Davis, Preddy Rowan Griffiths, Mike Hedges, Derek Walker, Kerry-Ann Fiddler, and Daniel Roberts. If there's anyone else who'd like to be formally made a member of the group, if you could just indicate that in the chat, and Dan can pick that up and add your names on there as well then. So the final part of the AGM is just to approve our annual report for 2021 to 2022. So if I could just ask in the chat for approval for that report, which has been circulated. I can't see anyone happy to approve from Pred. Right, great, thank you. The most important thing is that nobody said that they're not happy with it, so that's great. So that will conclude the AGM then, and we can move on now to the topic that we're looking at today, which is, of course, the role of cooperatives in the social care sector. And I'll just start with a few words on this, really. So it is clear that we face complex and multifaceted challenges in our social care system, not just now, but crucially when we look forward planning for the years ahead. Attendees might have seen coverage of last year's census, which has just been put out into the public domain. And that showed that the percentage of people in Wales aged over 65 has increased over the last 10 years, and it's now more than 1 in 5 of the population of Wales. And 1% of people in Wales are now aged 90 or over. Of course, it is great that the population of our nation is living longer, but with this brings demographic challenges with complex care and medical needs in many cases. And it all puts pressure on our care services. So we need to consider the shape of those care services, how we provide them, the model that they take, and the ethos underpinning them. So today's meeting will explore new models of delivery in social care. We'll also consider what social value and cooperation mean in this context and why they're needed. There is already legislation in place in Wales to support this, and there are already groups and organisations doing this, so we'll hear more about this today. But if we are to address the demographic time bomb that we face, this ambition must be strengthened and developed further. What are the challenges? What are the barriers? But equally importantly, what are the opportunities? These are the things that we need to consider today. And I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker on this topic, Geraint Jenkins from Cartrefi Cymru Co-operative. So Geraint, when you're ready, come up to the main stage.
Hello everyone, hope you can all hear and see me. Is that okay?
Yes, I can. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Hi everyone, thanks for the invite to come along today. I've got some slides I'd like to share, so hopefully this is going to work out. Okay, so can everyone see that okay? Yep, okay. Fab. So my name is Geraint Jenkins. I'm the Director of Operations and Digital at Cartrefi Cymru Co-operative. And I'm just going to give you a few slides on our organisation and our journey so far, transforming from a traditional support provider, registered charity in the third sector into a multi-stakeholder cooperative. So I'll just talk you through that now. A bit about us. We were formed back in 1989. We were a child of the White Paper and Strategy for Change in Wales, closing down lots of long-stay institutions, providing services to adults with learning disabilities across Wales. And we were formed by some families and third sector activists at the time to provide better services for adults with learning disabilities, with a big focus on moving people out of long-stay institutions into community group living settings. We were set up with a particular focus at the time on rural Wales and the valleys, services for people with adults, services for adults with learning disabilities wasn't developing as quickly as it was in the cities and more dense of areas of Wales. So that was our aim and focus at the time. Since then, we've supported many people to resettle and move out of long-stay institutions, and we support people now across Wales to live independently. In 2017, we started our transformation into a multi-stakeholder cooperative. It's been and continues to be a very sharp learning curve for us, but a very exciting and innovative one, which I'll go on to talk about. So where we work in 16 out of the 22 local authorities in Wales. We provide supported living services, some short stay and respite services, and also some home care services in North Wales. Just some of our numbers. We've got 1,200 staff across Wales who all support 650 people. The organisational size is around £30 million turnover in terms of money, and we've got currently 600 co-op members and rising. We've got 3 categories of membership to our organisation since we transformed into a cooperative. Our members are people who receive a service from us, so the people who use our service. The second category is people in the community who want to support our organisation, and those are families of the people we support, people who are close to the people we support, but also community partners, members of the community that want to support our work, and some organisations as well. And the third category of membership are the workforce at Cartrefi, who really are the life and soul of our organisation. The staff teams have had a really difficult few years, and they're the backbone of the organisation, and so they're our third category. Why we changed? So the people we support could have a voice and status as members, not just be passive recipients of care. Our workforce could have a voice and status as members, not just be contracted to do a job in our organisation. And so family and friends, supporters could come inside the organisation and join us and increase our resources, connections with the community in order to meet the challenges of social care. And because values of cooperation make sense for social care going forward, you know, we truly believe that the traditional commissioning and delivery of social care services needs to change if we're going to meet the challenges going forward, and we should be doing it together. People shouldn't just be done to services will be much more sustainable if we can build on everyone's skills and assets and enable everyone to contribute. In terms of our governance now, as we've transformed into a cooperative, we were a registered charity, pretty traditional organisation. We had a board, some senior managers, with some frontline managers, and then who managed our staff teams. That's pretty typical in our sector. And now we have a membership base which elect a council of members that appoints our board of management, who then gives direction on how the company should be run. So we really are pulling on everyone involved in the organisation to help us plan and organise our work, inform on strategy, but also still maintains a fairly robust management structure to manage the day-to-day challenges of delivering social care. So our progress so far, I think we've achieved a lot. We've got senior buy-in, so all our senior management and operational management teams are now brave enough to share the power. We do really listen to our members, and that does inform the thinking and how we run as an organisation. We've chosen our model, so we've gone for an all-in multi-stakeholder cooperative, not just a worker cooperative. We've done our legal changes, so we've done the move from charity status to cooperative status. We've continued to firm up the membership offer for all the categories of membership, and we've built up a membership base now of 600, and that's still growing. We are inspiring people to think and do community and democracy, and we continually hold lots of small workshops, to sort of keep inspiring people to think and help contribute to the delivery of services and redesigning services and making sure that we're being as innovative as we can. Participative evaluation, members throughout the organisation are able to vote on stories of our work. That's one example of how we evaluate how well we're performing. And we have used the most significant change model to help us with that, where the people we support, our staff and community members can hear stories of our work and vote on the most impact, the ones that have the most impact, or the ones that have the most learning, both positive and negative. Sharing valued roles, so the users and our staff are chairs of our local forums. They take an active role and chair our council of members, and our high-level council of members really have a direct link and role to appoint and manage our board, and using cooperative values to shape our work. Some of the challenges, it's been a bit bumpy the last few years, as you can imagine. Social care has been a tricky space to work in general, but that's been compounded since the since the pandemic. That really did slow down our progress in terms of building up our cooperative work and local forum work. It's reduced opportunities to engage and build community. Co-op forums weren't able to meet face to face, and still that continues to be difficult with COVID still being, being an issue. And lots of the replacements for that, the digital push for us, doesn't always work for everyone we support. So as great as digital solutions are for replacing face-to-face engagement, it doesn't meet the needs of all the people involved in our organisation, so it can never be completely replaced. So it has slowed us down. There's been an increased demand on services just because of the nature of the work. We've had reduced capacity due to sickness, and lots of anxiety and worry around support services. So that's both the people we support, but also families and communities in general have been really anxious about the pandemic, and that's slowed down our progress. Staffing shortages, not just related to COVID, but certainly that's been a contributory factor. The market is saturated. There's simply not enough people in the country that want to do social care in order to fill the vacancy and demand rate in our sector currently. The workforce fatigue that's resulted from the pandemic and the pressure involved in delivering services in such a tough climate, and workforce migration, as we've seen other sectors increasingly as we've seen the workforce opportunities to break into other sectors, and the hospitality sector, the retail sector have all under similar staffing pressures, and we've really seen a sideways move following the pandemic for some of our workforce. Looking forward, we're hoping to continue building our co-op forums back up. We were in a position where co-op forums were meeting across Wales, local forums attached to local sort of service areas. We're hoping to build them back up and start to build face-to-face opportunities back into the normal day-to-day running of the organisation. Building activities into mainstream work. So we've seen that ensuring our co-op activity is not something that's done as just an extra thing to do in terms of our day-to-day work, that it's really ingrained in our DNA and what we're about. So pulling it right back to personal goals and outcomes and planning support for people who use our services in a co-op way, and bringing that co-op activity into the mainstream. Reconnecting with communities. The communities we work in, the landscape's really changed since the pandemic, and so we've seen lots of opportunities and services change. Some move to digital, some stop altogether, some move buildings. So we need to do some robust remapping of our communities in order to move forward. And building and learning from our digital journey. So like lots of organisations like us, we probably done 10 years modernising in the space of a few months at the start of the pandemic, and we've really moved at such a pace in order to keep up with technology and use it in a way that benefits everyone in Cartrefi. So we want to keep building on that journey. It's been remarkable, really, what the workforce has achieved in that short time. And lastly, we want to create more opportunities for members to influence decisions and create more opportunities for members to have fun together. One thing that we've learnt from mutuals and other co-ops, particularly in the housing sector, is that the thing that people value lots is the social time together and using relationships and opportunities to come together and not just make decisions, but actually network, build up relationships and have more fun. So that's definitely on the list for us going forward. In terms of influencing decisions, it's kind of an acid test for us as we work through managing services, particularly in the pandemic, where we needed at times to revert back to a more sort of command control management style in order to get through some of the pinch points that we've had over the last couple of years. We want to get back to making sure we apply the acid test of, is this something we can devolve to our members to make a decision on before the senior teams sort of just move forward with a decision without consultation. So that's something we're hoping to get back on track with. So that was a very quick whistle-stop tour. Is there any questions at this stage?
Hi, Geraint. Thanks very much. We're going to do a Q&A at 1 o'clock, so if it's okay with you, I'll take all the questions.
Yeah, cool.
And we'll get.
Okay.
I'm sure. Thank you. Interesting to hear from your experience at Cartrefi Cymru Co-operative over the last few years, and how you plan moving forward as well. So thank you from all of us. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker now then is Meilys Smith, who is the Programme Lead for Community Health and So I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing from Meilys and her experiences. And here she comes up to the main stage. So thank you, Meilys.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me, and thank you very, very much for the invitation to come and speak about our experiences in Gwynedd. I'll give you a little bit of the background and hopefully give you a sense of where we're at, or where what we've learned and what we're still learning. So a little bit about myself. I always, since I was very young, wanted to be an accountant, very interested in economics, in business, did think I might like to start a business, but ended up going and trained to become an accountant in the private sector. But wanted to come back home to here in Gwynedd, North Wales, and ended up going into the local authority and worked with Audit Wales and other organisations in the public sector since. And I've been in social care now in Gwynedd for about 13 years, and I've been in various roles working with health and social care. And for quite a long time, I was working as a senior business manager, responsible for commissioning services. And I look back and I think about how terrible the way we commissioned some services was, how we went about it, the relationship we had with the market in all sectors. And I'm so pleased that a few years ago, shortly after the Social Services and Wellbeing Act came into force, we started to look at the market and started to look at the whole issue of how we support people in communities differently. And what we did about probably 6 or 7 years ago now, we started to use the Vanguard method to learn about what we were commissioning, where our money, where public money was going. And if you're not familiar with the Vanguard method, it's a method that helps you look at services system-wide from a citizen's perspective. So for the first time, we didn't look at our social services function or our commissioning function or our delivery functions as separate things. We looked at how all of those different systems and bits of the process impacted people who needed our support. And what we learned very, very quickly was that huge amounts of money was going into things that had nothing at all to do with helping people and supporting people have a good life. There was such a lot of money going into bureaucracy, authorising stuff, moving paper around, sticking information into various IT systems, compliance exercises, all of these things that were costing money. And that actually only a small proportion of time and money was going into people, people's wages, people's time on the ground helping people. So we did this and we had a bit of a rude awakening. And I was very, very lucky at the time that Cartrefi Cymru, as it happens, was one of our providers delivering home care for people in Gwynedd. And that Cartrefi Cymru were also working and looking at the Vanguard method as a way of revisiting how things were done. and we joined forces, and we essentially ran a pilot where Gwynedd Council said, let us give you some money so that 2 members of your staff work with us to try to do things differently. And that's what we did, and we started in a geographic area. And on a single person level to begin with, and then 2, 3, 4 people until it grew and grew. We just sat down and we said, if we were to do this differently, how would this system look? And I could talk about it for hours, but in a nutshell, what we learned was that if staff on the ground had the ability to build relationships with people and do what was right for those people, knowing that there was leadership support, that they could draw on other professionals' expertise, so district nursing, therapy, social services, doctors, if they knew they could access those support networks easily, things got better. But there was another really important bit of the jigsaw. And as we've heard from Geraint, Cartrefi Cymru is a cooperative, and there were many cases where we turned to people who were co-op members to support us, and wider community supporters pulled in. And I can remember one lady in particular, she was back and forth into hospital, different medical conditions, but very sadly, she had rat infestation in her home. And we had many conversations, and I remember phoning a colleague that I've known very well for years, working in housing, and said, this is a scenario, we're trying to do things differently, we're trying to look at things from the citizen's perspective, can we talk this through? And his response was, well, if you take this down the formal avenue, it'll be an eviction notice, there's no doubt about it. So I said, okay, so this home that means so much to her, she's going to lose potentially? And the answer was, well, yes, unfortunately. So I wouldn't mention that to the housing department officially. Okay. And what we did over the course of time was we worked with the co-op members and the community, and the house was fixed. We brought in a company to get rid of rats. Holes in the floorboards were fixed. The house was renovated quite a bit. There was work on the garden being done. And we could see how that lady was brightening up, how she was getting much better quality of life, not ending up in hospital all the time. And the saving to the wider health and social care system was immense. But the improvements to her life was the thing that made such a massive difference. And that came about because we recognised that you can't just buy a service and hope that that service is going to be good for that person. It needs to be part of that individual's networks, family, friends, community, in this case, the cooperative side of Cartrefi Cymru. Now, I realised at that point in time that we didn't have cooperatives throughout Gwynedd, that within the timescale that I had, we weren't going to be in a position where we could commission or collaborate with co-ops and co-ops alone. So the challenge I found myself with was, well, how do we create this environment within a market that's mixed? So in Gwynedd, we have had for a long time and still have, and this is a political will that we have a 50% in-house market, with the remainder being in the external sector, so third sector and the private sector. And the challenge we set ourselves as a group of people from that very broad market was that we would establish the same sort of values and principles within a new model of home care. And I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the time and task model, as we call it. And it's a model where typically a person has a care plan that says you need 3 calls a day at 7, 12 and 5. Each call is half an hour. That's what you're getting. And then staff are told, this is your rota, so you're going out for a couple of hours to work, then you're going home or wherever, then you're coming back into work for a couple of hours. And within those hours that you're working, you'll be paid and you'll be delivering X number of calls, but you won't be paid for the time when you're not working. And I'm sure this is very familiar to you, but what happens in that sort of model, where we believe that we're having value for money because it's only paying for the time spent in a person's home, is that you lose the opportunities for that community networking, working with other professionals in the community team, really being creative about how people can be supported. Because I strongly believe that supporting individuals isn't just about the time that you spend with the person directly delivering personal care, possibly, but it's about finding out what's going on. What can co-op members or community members or people around you help in assisting that person have a good life? So we worked really, really hard now on piloting with other parts of the market. So we transferred what we'd learned from the pilots with Cartrefi Cymru initially into a private sector business near Carnarvon, and we worked with them for a few months, and then with another private company on the Llyn Peninsula in Nefyn, before piloting in Tywyn in the south of Gwynedd with our in-house provider. And we learned the same things, that if you give staff autonomy and the ability to decide for themselves what's right, be supported in a different way and work with people, building relationships, you can get much, much better outcomes. But we found that the outcomes that we could get by working with Cartrefi Cymru as a cooperative could very much be replicated in the private and the public sectors. So again, I'll give you just a couple of examples of some stories that brings that alive, hopefully. So the company we were working with near Carnarvon, a company called Gofal Bro, it is a private company making a profit, and the directors are members of the family who run the business. And what they realised was that they were sending out lots of members of staff to care for lots of different people in the same community on the same housing estate. And basically they made contacts with a local housing association, obviously in the third sector, managed to get a room, very, very cheap rent. I think it was free of charge for a while. And they brought people together and they ran the lunch club. Now, the beauty of what they've done is that the lady who's one of the directors in that company has tapped into the network she has with a local football teams committee. She's on the committee, and she's brought some ladies from that committee who are willing to volunteer to cook, to clean, to wash the dishes. So out of the pound, or the pounds that we as a local authority were giving to that private company, we moved from seeing them deliver the old model, doing what we'd asked. It was no fault of the company. It was purely down to how we'd commissioned. We very quickly saw that that money going into that community and into that business was growing and growing and growing in value, because they were working with the community and tapping into the community. And we went from a position where 7 people were getting 7 calls for half an hour with 7 different care staff, to the same level of staffing with volunteers, actually growing into a group of 30, 35 people coming together to have lunch, to have conversations. And I remember sitting there with them and seeing one lady said, "Oh, I used to babysit that lady over there, and I hadn't seen her for ages, and we're back in touch with one another." And those are the stories that make it all worthwhile. And I've got lots of these stories, and again, I could talk about this for hours, but I think it's important to possibly explain where we're at now. So we've done lots of piloting, and we could see where there was value. So we could see there was a lot of money going into bureaucratic activity, but we could also see that if we worked differently and if we trusted providers, and we had a different conversation about the role of whatever sectors business in social care and community development, that we could create very different outcomes and very different models together. So we have gone through a tender exercise, and I'm very happy to share the tender documentation, and we do have evaluation reports that I could share. But we've gone out to tender essentially asking providers to work with us in communities to be part of a wider, what we call community resource team, so a team of professionals. And we've asked them to commit to work with people to work out what matters to them and to help give them a good life and bring to the table their skill set as professional domiciliary care workers, working to their registration with CIW and RISCA. So professional people, but saying that it's part of their responsibility to build a community, to work in the community. So it's a local patch-based model. It's a contract to work for 5 to 9 years in the local community, because we believe that you need that length of time to really build up the social networks. During the tender process, we asked people to respond to 4 questions, but there were 2 questions in particular that have helped us achieve what we wanted by means of that tender exercise. And one was about what's your knowledge and understanding of your local community and this one that you're tendering for, and what local networks and connections do you have? And the stories and the examples that came from all sectors was absolutely amazing. And the other question was around how they could help us achieve social value by means of this tender. So despite the fact that some companies, they are private companies, they are achieving social value for us. So the outcome of that tender process is that we can demonstrate a much higher proportion going into the 3rd sector than we had previously, but a much higher level of social value, and many more opportunities for working with communities. In terms of profits, we've got one private company who haven't included any profit whatsoever within their costing. No company has included more than 5% profit, with most of them at 2 or 3%. So we are reshaping the market, surely but slowly. So I'll leave it there and be very, very happy to share information and obviously to participate in the Q&A session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Meilys. That was really, really interesting to hear how things are being done in Gwynedd, and you spoke about the services that you deliver. So as Meilys said, we'll and any questions as they come up, if you want to type them in the Q&A, and you can direct them to one speaker or several speakers, entirely up to you. So thank you very much, Meilys. I'm sure we hear from you later. Okay, so we'll move on now to our 3rd and final speaker of this morning, I should say now, which is Hugh Irwin from Drive Wales. I don't know if I pronounced your surname right there, Hugh, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I got it wrong. So Hugh, if you'd like to come up to the main stage, please.
Hi, Hugh. If you just turn your...
If you just turn your camera on, here we go.
There we go. There he is. Okay.
Okay. Diolch, Captain, and Geraint. I'm Hugh from Drive. I'm here in place of the CEO, Irwin, who's not with us today. So I'll probably do a bit of a poorer job than she would do. But a little bit about Drive. Our birth was quite similar to Cartrefi's. We started off over 30 years ago as a response to the need to resettle people from those long stay institutions. We have just over 350 staff. We work across 5 or 6, I think it's 5 local authority areas and 3 health board areas, and we support around about, I'm looking at notes now, 660 people. I've got my notes. So the types of services we provide are a mixture of supported living, home care, and we do some day opportunities. It would be fair to say that for some time now, certainly as an organisation and as a board, we've been talking about, what can we do? How can we do things differently? Because we felt that our offer, whilst we've got absolutely great staff, very committed, very passionate, who are creative and want to do things differently, we felt that the offer, kind of hampered by traditional commissioning arrangements, wasn't very creative and wasn't necessarily responsive to the needs of families and people who needed help from us. So that our thinking around that was hampered by a number of things, really. We had a retirement of a long-standing chief executive who then very quickly subsequently died, which had a big impact on the organisation. And it took quite a while for the organisation, people that we support, staff, etc., to come to terms with that, because he was part of the fabric of the organisation. Very quickly, because a lot of our services are in RCT, we then had the floods to contend with, and so we had a lot of practical stuff that we had to help out with, and all the stresses that you have to deal with that. And then we have, of course, had the pandemic in the next month straight after the floods. So whilst we've been really eager to start thinking about how our offer can be completely different going forward, we've had quite a number of things chucked at us in the meantime that hasn't necessarily helped us move forward as quickly as we can. But nevertheless, we have resolve, and we are determined to do things differently going forward. So we've been asked today to talk about how social care planning, how can that, if it's done cooperatively, if it's planned and designed differently, cooperatively with all the right stakeholders around the table, how does that impact people that use services? How does it impact the workforce, people that work in our services, and other stakeholders, including people who commission services? So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. So if I talk to you first of all about the status quo, the stuff that we've experienced, and then talk about the opportunities that might be useful. I would have to say, just talking about the pandemic, of course, we know the pandemic was an awful time for people that we supported, and families, and for our staff. We lost quite a lot of people in across our services, but across families of people who work in our services, and actually people who work in our services themselves. It was a hard time, but with anything, sometimes there are good things that come out of adversity, and the rule book actually had to be thrown out, as others will know who work in this sector. The rule book had to be thrown out. There was no choice, and that actually helped us begin to think again about how can we do things differently, because we were forced to cooperate. We were forced to tear it up and think about how we can do stuff much better. So risk aversion wasn't as much. Creativity was at the fore. And one of the things that we're determined to do is not to lose some of that really important learning, whilst acknowledging, obviously, the awful things that came with the pandemic. So for us, the challenge is, first of all, around the status quo. So the vast majority of our services are commissioned in a traditional model. So for us, that discourages collaboration from the word off. It creates uncertainty for staff. It can create uncertainty for people that we support, for supported families, etc., because of the short-term nature, and because of the top-down nature as well. There has been issues around the prices of contracts as well, about whether they are full cost recovery, whether they're actually the expectations in the contracts are met with the resources required. And that's not always about providers saying we need more money. Actually, it's sometimes about providers saying, actually, do you know what? We can do a lot more with this money if actually we could be a bit more creative, but actually we can't do sometimes what you're asking because you're being too prescriptive. And I think sometimes that there's an assumption made that it's always about asking for more. It's not. It's about, let's have a conversation, let's cooperate, let's co-produce actually how we can spend this a bit more, because we all recognise that local authorities and health boards are struggling as well. You know, we know there's not a limitless pot there, but having more adult conversations is the way forward, and less prescription. So that's stuff that has already been talked about around measuring time and tasks, and having, you know, rigidity in terms of the use of resources hasn't really been helpful. Short-term contracts again has a big impact on recruitment, retention, and just can cause quite a stress all round. But it also, for us, stifles creativity and possibilities thinking. So if you do things like supported living, if you provide home care, if you provide day opportunities, it's almost as if the model's prescribed from the word off. Okay, so you're commissioned to do this. So you're brought down a path of thinking already about how things should be done. Actually, with a clean slate, and talking about possibilities and talking to people about what actually matters to them, if that is the true starting point, actually you may begin to go down different avenues. So it does stifle creativity. So there is also something about the assumptions made around the traditional commissioning arrangements. It assumes expertise sits at the commissioning table, and this is not a slight, I should say, to people who commission services, because we've got some great relationships with people who commission services. It is, I think they feel the frustration as well, because I think they understand that they don't have all the answers, but there is almost an implicit assumption that, you know, this is the stuff we know that's needed, and this is how we need to do it, and it doesn't work. It doesn't always work, and actually it can create quite a bit of risk across the system. So what we find, for example, as a board, and I just finished as the chair. I've been the chair for 4 years. I took an extended role in that to see us throughout the pandemic. But I particularly found it, and colleagues have found it, really frustrating to see the amount of time our managers, our senior management team is spending on tendering, on dealing with managing major risks like TUPE, and dealing with all those things, having to dot the I's and cross the T's on a lot of bureaucracy around tendering, without actually spending enough time on things like governance, on times like creative business development and co-designing services that look a bit different with others. It takes them away from some really, really important stuff, and that creates, you know, that's risky for an organisation and ultimately for the people that we're trying to support. So the dynamic is top down. It is about doing two. It assumes expertise in the wrong place, and it's slightly risk averse. Now, in another life, so I'm a freelancer. I do work exclusively for public and third sector services in Wales, and I speak quite a lot to people about what they think of services, whether it's social care, health, housing, etc. And we hear consistently that people are concerned with principles and values, how they're involved in discussions and planning about their lives. It's really, really important, and that's not news to you guys. That's enshrined as the context to the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, but it still doesn't happen as a matter of doing things. It doesn't. It's not the norm still. And what we've heard consistently is, because we talk about outcomes quite a lot, and I think we have a preoccupation with outcomes, and I'm probably sensing some people getting a little bit nervous about me saying this, but what we hear is people think outcomes are important, but they think that principles and values and involving them in decision making is just as important, if not slightly more, and people feel the discussions we've had have led us to the position that if you do that stuff right with a principle of co-design, actually the outcomes will look after themselves. Because if you start with the prescription at the start, Okay, it leads you one direction. If you start with a kind of a general discussion around what matters, and actually some of the where people are end up at actually might be flexible depending on how the conversation goes. I hope that makes sense. So principles and values are just as important, or if not, even more important for some people than actually a prescribed outcome. So that sounds quite sort of negative, but it's not meant to be. It's about context, about where we've been at and where we're at the moment, but hopefully it provides a bit of context for where we want to go. So there are opportunities for embedding a new cooperative approach in provision. So for the people we support, doing things more cooperatively means that there's less prescription. They will lend themselves to having proper what matters conversations that are not constrained by a model of provision. Okay, so they're not service-led discussions, they're life-led discussions. They're truly co-productive, which is messy, human, it's dynamic, and that means having people that are comfortable with that messiness and that dynamic. It's also it's based on outcomes, based on ordinary life principles. So when we think about the lives we lead, it's not the outcome sometimes in a traditional care service. The outcome is almost about the care, but actually the outcomes that I'm interested in my life they're around having a good sense of purpose in my life and having really functional, happy, loving relationships in my life. If and when I do develop care needs, that will be important to me, but it'll not be it's a means to an end. I want to get that sorted so we can get back to the most important stuff, which is having a purpose in life and having access to those meaningful relationships and having really good stuff to do in my life. So the end game isn't care, it's not formal care. The end game is that stuff, and I think we forget about that at times. I think also if we get that stuff right, if we respond to the what matters conversations through cooperative ways of working, we're far more likely to prevent or at least slow down progression towards the need for more formal care. So it's there is something to consider around the money and the prevention agenda. I think also the workforce, it gives them an opportunity because they are working with people day in, day out. They know these people, they know them as individuals, they know them on a human level, they are part of their circle of support. So tapping into their expertise is really, really important. I always feel humbled when I speak to staff about not just how committed they are, but how much they know the individuals and how many ideas they've got about how better things could be for in the world around them and what our contribution could be to that as an organisation. So staff can feel more valued. There's an opportunity for them to shape the future, and there's much more ownership. And looking at stakeholders, I mean, traditionally our stakeholders have been social care commissioners, people from health, and sometimes ourselves. But actually we're starting now to have conversations with people from private sector, leisure sector, education, employment organisations, because we have started to throw the rule book out a bit. There's a risk to share risks, and there's an opportunity to share risks and opportunities. There is an emphasis for us in being place-based as much as possible. So being asset-based, taking a community development approach to this stuff as much as possible. So families as well, and others who are part of the people that we support's lives, they can be truly part of new governance arrangements. So the safeguards that we presume that sit in traditional commissioning arrangements, actually if people are part of new governance cooperative arrangements, well, the governance can be there to deal with things if they don't go so well anyway. We don't need to have a traditional model to do that. And I think part of it is about being comfortable with messiness and actually things going wrong as well, and not necessarily throwing the baby out with the bathwater when that happens, but obviously taking stock of that learning as and when it happens. So that's all really I've got to say about that. I'm conscious I've just said a lot of words. Hopefully they've made some sort of garbled sense. And again, I'm like colleagues that have spoken, I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, that was really, really interesting. Really great speakers today. I know there are Q&A already, and I believe that Mike has been working the room and prepping people and asking if they'd be happy to come up to the stage to ask their question. So the first question that I can see in the Q&A is from Paula. So Paula, would you be happy to come up to the stage to ask your question? Your question is to Mike. So we bring Meilys up to the stage as well.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm really sorry. I'm actually in a community. I had to move from where I was earlier because they've got an activity, and I'm actually now just sitting opposite a big, huge boxing ring. So just in case anybody's wondering. So thank you very much, Meilys. I really enjoyed listening to the journey there. And obviously, you know, some of these things take quite a bit of time. But one of the things I wanted to ask was something that we've noticed within our own community is that there does seem to appear to have been a bit of a drop-off in volunteering and volunteers, particularly since COVID. And I'm just wondering whether that has happened in any of the sort of projects that you've been working on, where you've sort of almost brought together, you know, staff members and volunteers within a community setting to support sort of service delivery.
Yeah, we've experienced the same sort of thing. People during COVID had generally more time. And I think there was that real sense of we're in this together. It's a big crisis, and people went the extra mile, and then people had to go back to work or they got tired or whatever. So in general, yes. But with this new model of home care that we have, the really important thing in it is that very, very local, when I say local, kind of individual family level conversations, neighborhood conversations. And what we generally find is, if you ask a person, would you be happy to have a chat about how you as a neighbour, say, might be able to help a little bit to help your next door neighbour have a good life? People respond really, really well, respond much better than if you fund, say, a befriending scheme or a semi-formal volunteering scheme. So that's what we're learning. It's all about those very personal networks, relationships. And sometimes you ask or you try to approach the first time and it doesn't happen, but it's all about trust building, relationship building. So yes, we're seeing that we're still having very, very positive responses from communities.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula, for your question, and thank you, Meilys, for your answer as well. So I know that Lisa has some questions now, and Lisa's first question will be to Geraint. So if I could ask.
Hi, can you see me? Can you
Hi.
hear me? Okay. Hi, Geraint. I just wanted to ask, with all the changes that you described in terms of Cartrefi Cymru moving towards a cooperative organisation, just what changes you saw for the people you support? So what did it make to their difference? Did it make to their day-to-day life?
Yeah, hi Lisa, hi again. Great question. I suppose it's been varied. So lots of the people we support have had, I'd say, more opportunities to be involved in things. So some examples, you know, the council of members have organised elections, and some of the people we support have had opportunities to be involved in them kinds of forums and sort of shared power arrangements there. Lots of the people we support, as a result of the forums organising activity locally, have been involved in more opportunities to make decisions for the organisation. So an example, we've recently commissioned some digital tools for the organisation. So we're about to roll out smart organisation, and the people we support and our staff were involved in the procurement of that service. We've engaged recently with all the people we support on how they want to be involved in recruitment and choosing staff, and how we go about them things. So, but I'd say that's limited to some of the people we support. in terms of the wider impact on day-to-day delivery of care, I think a lot of the benefit comes from a workforce that's really plugged in and engaged. And I think there's a trickle-down effect of, if you can trust staff more, as Meilys said, empower people and the workforce more to make more decisions locally and do what's right for people in a much more sort of power-sharing, trusting relationship, that actually the support, the quality of support improves, just because you've got a workforce that's plugged in a bit more and has the freedom to work with communities in a much more switched on way. So I don't know if that answers the question entirely, but I suppose it's been varied, and it's always a challenge with supporting individuals with learning disabilities. Some of the people we support are really able to do and be part of things that some people would struggle with, and so there's always that sort of that balance to find. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Geraint. I know, Lisa, you've got a
Sorry.
question. You'd like to stay here and we'll bring Meilys back to the stage so that you can ask your question to her.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Meilys. I was really interested in what you had to say, and obviously, you know, we're facing very similar situation to the one that you described prior to the work that you've undertaken. And I have lots of questions to you, really, but one of the things I think I was most wanting to ask just right now is, you mentioned trying to work with internal services and applying the same values and principles as you did with Cartrefi. And I just wondered how that went in terms of trying to change, you know, because I know with our own internal provision locally, it's really, really difficult to change a very well established culture. So I'd be really intrigued to know how well that went and what the challenges were and how you overcame them.
Yeah, it is exceptionally challenging, and I'm a member of the senior management team for adult services in Gwynedd, so I'm overseeing the sort of commissioning and the transformation side, but also got responsibility for that in-house transformation of the delivery arm, if you like, and I've got members of my team who've been working with that team for a long time, and I think the fact that Gwynedd is investing in people who can help people through that cultural shift and mindset is really valuable. It's not just going to happen. When we started discussing these ideas with the in-house provider, you got the usual, no, this won't work, no, that won't work, you need to pay us more, well, oh, this is a great idea, isn't it? But we haven't got enough resources, waiting list. Yeah. All of these things. What I would say is, the only real way of getting people to really buy into it and believe in it is give them the opportunity to try it out for themselves with some mentoring and with support. And when we did pilot with the in-house provider with a really small team, we selected a leader for them, one of their supervisors, who got it, who wanted to work, who was passionate about that way of working. And they saw for themselves what could work for them. Mm-hmm. And we got some data for that initial pilot that showed, you know, reduced sickness absence, better retention, you know, massive increase in recruitment. And this is in Tywyn, South Meirionydd, really rural area. People have said for yonks, oh, you'll never get staff in this area. They're all incomers from Birmingham, so that there's nothing we can do. And then those are the staff who go and talk to their friends in the community, say, you know what, give care a go, because it's a different job now to what it used to be. There's no point in me saying they're not going to listen to me. Mm-hmm. So it's a massive cultural change. It takes a lot of effort, but we're getting there. And if I showed you a map of Gwynedd, of where we've done this and where we haven't, there's a direct correlation between waiting lists and application of the new model.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa, for your questions. Meilys, if you'd like to stay on the stage, because I know that question all three of our panelists, so if I could ask the other two as well up on the stage. And I know that Derek has a question. Yeah, so Derek, I'm very proud. Here comes.
Thank you. They were great presentations, everyone, and really positive. Just, I guess, demonstrating how change is possible, and positive things can happen. I guess my question for you, to us as an audience, and to the MSs in the room, to us at Compass, and to others, is, what would be the one thing that we, most important thing or next step you would see that's needed to see more of what you're doing happen at a greater scale across Wales? I mean, what could be the things that could be transformational that would support more of your work to take place across Wales?
Shall I go first? For me, it's helping people not just accept and try to copy what somebody else has done. It's about changing the mindset and the culture. And I think very often it's difficult because it's that thing that you can't feel or see, you can't measure easily. I think the Vanguard method for us has really helped change leadership thinking. That's been the important thing. And that's helped us change the system. I think for us, we've gone as far as we possibly can in terms of moving away from commissioning in hours. That has been a massive block. If you can trust providers and say, here's an amount of money to do what's right in your community for this group of people, and we'll work with you to make the best possible use of that money, that's a massive step forward. I'd say with this new tender in Gwynedd, we're almost there. The one thing that didn't allow me to go quite as far as I wanted, well, I'll say two things, and they're both systemic things. One is the current charging policy for social care, which I think could be adapted slightly, because it still ties you into an understanding of the exact hours somebody's been delivered. And the second one is the continuing healthcare regime. So sorry, you asked me for one and I've given you two or three, but hope that helps.
I don't mind going next if that's helpful. I think it's systemic, isn't it? I think that there is a number of responses to this. So what I hear in work that I'm involved in is people who are involved in commissioning wanting to do the right thing. Actually, they're good people with the right values. But what I hear is they struggle sometimes because they've been conditioned and they've been constrained by quite traditional ways of doing things. So what I've heard from people is I want to be a better, and I use their language, alongside-er. Can you help me be a better alongside-er? And oh, by the way, as part of that conversation, can you help me so that I can go back to the powers that be in my local authority or health board and reassure them that I'm looking after things like the public purse? Can you help me as part of that conversation be able to articulate that? So for me, that stuff's not rocket science. I think it's making sure that you have the right people around the table having those discussions, because what you'll find is you'll have social care having their discussions, you'll have health having their discussions, you'll have maybe the third sector doing that stuff as well, but bringing them together in a really safe space to actually design, and that's even before, never mind going to people that need services and families, but bringing them in a really safe space to look at what does a different relationship look like here? How can we share risks and opportunities? And it is about sharing risks and opportunities and actually making sure that when stuff goes wrong, I think, as I said earlier, it's about dealing with that in the right way, because stuff goes wrong in life. That's what happens. I also think there is something much earlier on. So I'm a social worker by trade. I'm still registered. I haven't been a social worker for years, but I qualified in '96, and that's when the NHS and Community Care Act was around, and I actually, from the word off, I got really not bored, but felt constrained by what social work was telling me I should be doing. It was about case management. It was about streamlining people. It was about having a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to the human condition, which didn't resonate with me at all. And I think people who've gone through training in my area have been kind of conditioned to try and triage people in a very uniform way towards prescribed outcomes. I think people before that in the you know, who came through social work in the 70s they all received training in a kind of community development vein. So they got the fact that local assets and needs in their communities are really, really important. And their social work was going out and about, creating relationships and trying to help the people that they've been tasked to help with through those relationships. And then what you find is there's actually a new cohort that are coming through in terms of training now, which are going back to that kind of community development model. But there's a whole kind of cohort in the middle that are struggling. And so it might be we might take a punt on that and go, well, that's going to eventually, you know, sort itself out. But that's going to take too long. I do think they need to be helped, because I think they're struggling with creativity and risk taking in that group. I hope that makes sense.
I agree both with Meilys and Hugh's input, and I suppose just to bring something different to it, if I was to focus on something, it would be workforce development. The Vanguard method for Cartrefi has been really inspirational in terms of redesigning services, and we've done that a few times, but one with Meilys and the provision in Gwynedd, but also some small pilots in Powys and Carmarthenshire that have seen, you know, capacity double in community teams. You know, we've literally supported double the amount of people with the same investment from local commissioning teams. But the byproduct, and perhaps the bit I'm getting to, the most important bit, is how it helps professionalise the workforce in a way that we're not doing at the moment as a sector. So, you know, Social Care Wales have gone some way to help professionalise the workforce, but that's, you know, other than registration and the costs associated to that, it's hard to see the benefit for the frontline workforce yet. But what the change in the commissioning model does in terms of moving from time and task to demand-based commissioning is really change the thinking and the mindset of frontline support staff. You know, the more we can trust support staff to do the right thing, get them plugged into communities, give them autonomy to do what's right for people and deliver what matters, give them space to make mistakes and pull the learning from that, and have a strong sense of you know, connection with community and the person they're supporting. The return on that we've seen has been tremendous. So Meilys has mentioned some of these things. So sickness decreases, morale goes up. You know, you end up supporting more people. You end up with people more plugged in, people less fatigued. You're able to deliver much more in a more sensible way. And I genuinely think that that's the return on capacity to the sector in working that way would solve the recruitment crisis almost on its own, you know, because there's money something to do with it. You know, wages, we need to continue to push for increased wages for frontline staff. But I think the way we deliver services is just as important in order to get, you know, professional support workers feeling like a professional workforce and feeling like they've got something to give Wales in the sector, and hopefully get the same rally round support and commitment that health colleagues get. You know, the NHS has lots and lots of support across Wales, quite rightly so, and we need to get our social care workforce in the same space and held on the same mantle as our health colleagues.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't agree more. Resonating with me from Geraint, because I took a visit to my local FE college just this week, and they wanted to raise with me was the WJC it has been, and how much they're really struggling to engage and to stay on that training. The right method of training for vocational studies, like that is just so important, isn't it? Okay. And to make it more exciting, it's from Anonymous. So I don't know who Anonymous is, but if they would like to come up to us, they have a question about differentials across Wales. We'd be surprised with whoever you are if you'd like to come up to the stage.
It wasn't me, Vikki, but I think they've had an option to do it, to post it anonymously. So I think if you just ask the question to the panel, that would be great.
Okay. Here is the question. It's a very good question, even though we don't know who's asked it. So one of the concerns is that there are differences across Wales, even with interpretation of strategy. How do we make it easy? So should we go around in the same order again? Meilys, would you like to start?
Yeah, it's a huge question, really important question. But I think for me, and from what we've learned, one of the first things I learned about our system was that the people came into contact with when they hit any form of crisis point, very often social workers were so far removed from the other professional people could support that there was no chance on earth of having a good network of supportive people around the individual. So we need to bring people who can help people together, regardless of whether that's a group of people employed by health, by social care, whether they're volunteers, family members, or whether they're commissioned services. And I think the rude awakening for me has been that we have for a very long time treated people that we commission services from and organisations as if they're outside of the system, as if they're there to be dubious about, as if they're not as important as other parts of the system. And the minute you bring providers and staff in particular to have that level playing field and to build your entire system on the basis of relationships, then hopefully we'll get somewhere a bit better.
I'm the anonymous person. So thank you for that. That's really poignant. And actually, I think you're absolutely right. It's getting people together, isn't it? So thank you, Meilys.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay.
Shall I go next? Is that okay? Yeah. Sorry, I'm frozen on the screen here. I'm not. Can you see me okay? Am I moving okay, or am I a frozen picture? Yes.
No, you're moving.
But what I can see, what you can see are two different things. I think for me is that can be a concern or it can be a good thing, the differential, because as human beings and communities, we're not all the same. So, you know, in Wales, we have a range of different things going on. We've got some communities with very specific linguistic needs. Our communities and families will have different assets. So some local communities that look very, very different to other local communities. So there's some with some really great opportunities that look very different from a community down the road, which is basically part of the conversation. Some people have a very comprehensive and very involved personal support network. Some people don't. The socioeconomic factors come into it as well, about how, you know, how wealthy and we are, and I suppose how competent and confident we are about articulating about, you know, what we need and what we want in our lives. So I think that's okay, and I think that's really important, actually, that we recognise that there is difference. I think the consistency for me is about making sure that everyone is and I mean in this truest sense, is ask what matters to you in your life. How can we help? And making sure that they're not service-led discussions, but what can we do to get you to, you know, a better place, and doing that in genuine partnership there, as opposed to doing it to stop people getting towards formal service if they need it. Does that make sense? So it's a genuine, transparent discussion. So the consistency is about what matters, and it's about then trying to respond to that in a transparent way. I think that's more where the consistency should be, because I don't think human beings or communities actually do come in a one size fits all.
Thanks, Hugh.
Yeah, I agree. So to add to that, I suppose in terms of the consistency in Wales, from Wales has lots and lots of different social care providers working across different areas, and about 80% of that is private social care, profit-making organisations. So there's a really sort of diverse landscape for social care delivery across Wales. In terms of, and I think that's going to be the case for a long time in terms of the marketisation of social care. In terms of the consistency, I think it's about engaging with citizens and communities before tendering. And so there's really great examples. Meilys is one example of where citizens and communities were engaged, and a framework was put together that really reflected what the community needs. Some other examples over recent years, Swansea, Bridgend, Powys have all engaged in similar ways to sort of build a framework that's locality patch-based, asset-based, and commission providers under the principles of what the community needs, and that does help focus, varied different providers to get on the same page, work collaboratively, and deliver what matters for communities and individuals. But it does still, it's still a constant battle, I would think, to get that experience of delivering what matters to citizens all the time from every different provider. That's a big challenge for commissioners, which I should imagine is a big task. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie, for your question. All of Hannah's for your answers. For your contributions throughout this afternoon's meeting that it's been useful occasion, so thank you very much. And shortly we can allow people to and do some networking if you want. I'm going to have to very short. I would like to ask Mike to come up to the stage, be his with us, because he's sadly going to be passed for an exciting new role in the Welsh Government. Like your support throughout the years on the CPG is valuable, both face to face and with.
Yeah.
Actually, how to use Remo. We're really going to miss you. So thank you very much for what you've done, and for everyone who appreciates my. You can see there is a little icon.
That's all right.
Mike,
No, it's been a Compass, formerly Wales Co-operative Centre for the last 6 years, and it's been an absolute joy. I've learned so much, and learned through so much for the cross-party group, and I hope we've made some big changes and helped to put some pressures on the powers that be. So I'm onto a new chapter at Welsh Government, working for the Centre for Digital Public Services as comms manager. So yeah, exciting times for me. But I'll definitely be returning as a guest for the cross-party group of co-ops and mutuals, because it's still a passionate area of mine, and we'll see you around. It's not a goodbye. It's not a farewell. It's a goodbye. Yeah. Brilliant.
We all wish you every success in your new role. So thank you once again to if people join and just network them to do that. I'll have planners of the cross-party group.
Thanks, Vikki. Thanks, everyone. We'll take you back to the remote floor now. All the best.